Bobby Fischer launches a very aggressive opening attack against Reuben Fine in this match, which results in the game ending in just 17 moves. So let's watch the game. Bobby Fischer is playing with the white pieces here, and he starts off with e4, and e5 is played by Fine, who is playing with the black pieces. And after the knight to f3 move, knight c6 move is played. This is the king's knight opening normal variation, and now with the bishop to c4 move, it becomes the Italian game and Giocchio piano opening basically. So now after this pawn push to b4, now this is the events gambit on the board. So if the bishop accepts this pawn, which happens in the game, the pawn push to c3 and d4 happens, which basically will result in the player who is playing this gambit losing 2 pawns, but you can launch an incredible attack against your opponent. So let's see what happens. So after that, c3 is played, hitting this bishop, so the bishop had to retreat and it goes to a5, and after that the pawn push to d4 happens, attacking the center pawn. And if this pawn is captured, the pawn is not captured back, and instead Fischer goes for castling, and he again take this free pawn. You cannot capture this pawn with your knight now because of the support of the bishop there. So queen to b3 is played by Fischer, creating an attack on this weak f7 square, creating a battery with your queen and the bishop. So to avoid that, queen to e7 is played by Fine, and now this pawn is taken back. And here, as you can see, Fischer is basically down by 2 pawns as of this position, but all his pieces are looking at uh, you know the king's weak squares, launching an attack on the black king. So knight to f6 is being played, looking to get the king to safety to castle on the king's side. So knight to d5 is played now, attacking the queen. So the knight captures the knight, and the pawn captures the knight back, which basically opens up this e file and leaves the king and the queen vulnerable. And because of the presence of the bishop here, you still cannot bring your bishop rook over here, and this bishop is actually covering that. So the knight to e5 is played now because this pawn also attacks this knight, and the knight to e5 is played, but it was suggested that you castle at this point of time, sacrificing that knight because you're already up by 2 pawns. So that would have saved the game. But so the knight captures the knight, and the queen captures the knight back. So now the bishop comes to b2, fianchetting this bishop, attacking the queen, and also this g7 pawn over here, and the rook through that. So the queen goes to g5 here, but here it was better to bring back your queen to the e7 square, but he went for g5 over here. So now h4 is played, attacking the queen, trying to deflect it off this particular diagonal. You'll understand why quite soon, because Fine now goes ahead and capture this free pawn. This the better move was to bring your queen over here to h6, protecting this pawn, which will prevent from this bishop from coming over here and capturing this crucial pawn. This pawn is a very important piece because it's covered this particular square over here. So but that didn't happen, so the bishop captures that pawn, and there is an attack on the rook, and the rook comes to g8, which basically was the blunder, and now it's checkmate return in at least 2 lines of the game. So after this, the rook now comes to e1 with a check, and the king moves away basically, and then Fischer plays queen to g3, this stunning move which basically forces the resignation of Reuben Fine. So I'll show you why Fine resigned as of this position if you didn't understand. So basically what really happening is now is that this king here is stuck. He cannot, there's no space for him to go, and one check will end the game basically, and this bishop can land that check. So in this position, if you capture the queen, go for a queen exchange, the bishop will just go to f6 with a check, and the game will be over. So instead of doing that, if you try to capture this particular bishop with your, from this position, let's say you capture this particular bishop with your rook, your queen is hanging and the check, and after the following moves, the same situation will happen again. So if you try to play c6 here, let's say from this position, you try to give a space for the king to escape over here to c6, then Fischer will not go for the capture, and he will just push his pawn to d6, covering these two crucial squares and preventing the escape of the king. And the earlier moves are still in place. So as of this position, the game resigned because the checkmate would happen like this by Fischer. So that's the game. Thanks very much for watching. We'll be back with more such KTV videos.